Okay, well, welcome everybody. Let me go ahead and start with the week's news in the world of solar. And then I see Dennis, you've joined us. That's good. So we'll throw something open to you, but I may also ask people if they have any other questions or comments or issues they want to bring up. So in this week, solar news, the big news at this point is President Biden just announced that he's putting on hold the 24 months, the tariffs that have been imposed on the panel manufacturers who relocated from China, going to Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. The Department of Justice or the Department of Commerce had opened an investigation into these tariffs to see if the Chinese manufacturers were just simply moving their facilities, to avoid paying tariffs, which I would file under the of course they are, but doesn't need a 2-year investigation for that. But anyway, there were concerns because they were talking about putting retroactive tariffs in place, which could be as high as 250% of the cost of the panels. So what happened is the panel manufacturers just stopped shipping to the United States, which then, since it represents about 80% of the solar panel market in the US, the industry found itself without supplies. And so a lot of governors, there was 19 governors who asked that the Biden administration do something about this. So then this week, actually, I think just yesterday, they did announce there's a 24-month hold on any tariff activity from those countries. And there will be no retroactive tariffs, regardless of what is determined by the Department of Commerce. So I think they're hoping that the manufacturers will begin shipping panels to the US again. Then, as evidence of the product supply chain issues, they announced that in the first quarter of 2022, there was a 24% decline in solar installations in the US. That was almost all in the utility scale world. There was a 41% quarter to quarter decline in utility scale installations. And most of that had to do with the fact they simply could not get product. A lot of the industry organizations have downgraded the growth projections by about 50% for this year due to supply chain issues. Although the bright spot was residential. Residential solar is actually up 30% quarter to quarter this year. So pretty much all of it was in the utility scale. The International Code Council has announced they're publishing a document called the 2021 International Solar Energy Provision document. And what this is they're taking all the different standards, all the international standards and the NEC, and they're putting together in one document the codes and standards that apply to the solar industry. So nice reference document if you're into that kind of thing. Price is $63.50 and it's 302 pages long. I looked at some sample pages. It's about as dry as milquetoast looking through it. It's just one reference to one after another, and I'll probably have to buy it. I was trying to avoid it. The solar shingles, shingled modules, and this gets a little bit confusing because solar shingles we're used to, they're the kind of things that look like shingles, and Tesla has their thing. And I've talked in previous sessions how I think it's kind of a dumb idea, but it's always raises its ugly head. It's wire management issues and heat issues because they're on the deck and other things like that. But anyway, but shingled modules is a different concept. What they're doing is taking the cells and slightly overlapping them on the module so that you get a higher concentration of actual working part of the cell exposed to sunlight. Well, apparently Solaria filed suit against Canadian Solar, claiming a patent infringement in their shingled module product that they released. And the US International Trade Commission found in favor of Solaria. So as part of the settlement, Canadian Solar has announced they will not sell this product in the United States for the next 7 years. So that was interesting as people are fighting with each other. The EIA has announced that they anticipate that the drought in California will result in about a 50% reduction in hydro power in that state. Currently, hydro accounts for about 15% of the energy that's produced in California. They're thinking it's going to drop to about 8%. And they're looking that prices will increase probably about 5% over the summer because of the drought for electricity. And this is one for you, Tony. I don't know, you're probably aware of this, but there's a bill in Ohio that's been proposed where they want to basically subsidize utilities for installing charging stations. And they're going to allow, or at least the proposal is to allow these utilities to recoup the cost of the investment of the charging station from their customers, whether they use the charging stations or not. So that's a nice little infrastructure thing going.
And get to profit from providing the electricity for those charging stations forever. So pay me to put them in, pay me to use them, and the bill payer in the former case will be people, whether you have electric vehicles or not.
Yeah, well, you know, they're getting some payback from their $62 million bribe to the Speaker of the House. So.
That's right. There has to be some ROI on the bribery.
No.
Yeah, this is where it's coming through.
Yeah, I thought it was so funny with that whole thing too, because they actually, you know, it was a huge scandal and they've arrested the Speaker of the House and all of that, but they never actually repealed the bills that were under this bribe thing. You know, they got rid of the one big one with the nuclear thing, but it's like, let's forget about that over there, you know, because, you know, it's been paid for. So they're also, as part of this bill, saying that they're going to allow for a $2,000 sales tax rebate on electric vehicle purchases in the state of Ohio, which seems weird because they charge an extra several $100s for the license tag in Ohio if you have an electric vehicle. So I guess if you buy a new one, they're going to give you money back, but if you own one, they're going to charge you for it. So that's and the justification there is because you're not paying as much for gasoline taxes, so therefore they have to get it somewhere. So well, that's the news that I've got in the world of solar. Does anybody have anything to add news-wise or an issue they ran into this week that they want to bring up for the good of the cause? Give everybody just a second. But Devin, you just unmuted. Did you have something to say?
No, I probably did it by mistake. Or just okay. Trying to see something. I mean, a company I was working with in Trinidad who works more regular with, they had approached Longi to obtain distributorship for the Caribbean. They were saying that the expectations was basically around 10 megawatts on an annual basis for that to happen. But we are in negotiations with them because there are a couple of utility scale systems for the Caribbean, and they have approached some of these companies doing these utility scale, and they seem a bit confident that they might be able to get some kind of traction with the business to supply the PV module. So it's a little discussion we have with them is if they could hand over the customers to us,
Okay.
if it can be that kind of marketing.
So did I understand you said that you were approached by Longi to be the distributor in the Caribbean?
We approached them as a dealership option first, and from the
Okay.
dealership to opted transfer to distributorship.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, Dennis, I'm gonna turn things over to you to begin the discussion. And this is Dennis Nickerson. And I know Tony introduced him to our motley crew here, and you're going to talk about a product that you're working on and try and get some feedback.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for the introduction, Jay and Tony. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I'm based out of South Florida. My name's Dennis. Founded a company 3 years ago called Portable Solar. Sole founder. We've got some engineers that work for us in California, and we've been fortunate enough to get some funding from the U.S. government and the California state government to move forward on a prototype, which I'll show you in a second, for what I'm calling a self-assembled solar mounting system, because we wanted to address kind of the soft cost issue in residential solar, in which, 15, 20 years ago, about 2/3 of the cost of an rooftop install was in the hardware and 1/3 was soft. Now it's kind of flipped. And, most of that soft cost. Sorry?
Sorry.
Most of that's, related to having the fairly labor-intensive installation process, customer acquisition, and whatnot. And so what we wanted to do is to see if there was a way to kind of get away from the roof and have something that could be kind of small and simple, that could be placed on the ground, not mounted on the ground, so no poured concrete or pilings or anything like that, and could be assembled by the resident themselves. Could be an owner, could be a renter of a single family home, and basically call an electrician to connect it to the house electrical panel. So here's kind of our current design of what we came up with. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, I've got it.
So it's a PV panel mounting system. It comes in 4 parts, the 2 side panels, and then 2 hollow cavities, one big one in the back and a smaller one in the front. That together, they all kind of snap together, form a tilt angle, which kind of mimics the 22 degrees or so of a standard pitched roof in North America. Doesn't have to be, it could be more, it could be less, with inverters. And basically we have people that have kind of never seen this before and have assembled one of them with the panel, fastening a panel to it in about 13 minutes or so, including the time that it takes to fill up water. And so I should say here that these 2 pieces in the back and the one in the front are hollow cavities, and they're watertight. So the idea is that you would basically put a garden hose in a hole here, and then one here basically, and fill it up with water or potentially sand. And that's what provides your ballast against strong winds, right? Which we haven't done the testing yet to know which category of hurricane it could withstand. It may not make it as much as category 5, but we're aiming for something north of 105, 110 miles an hour. And collectively, with just water in those 2 tanks, it's over 200 pounds of ballast. Of course, another option too is, since it's accessible in the yard, it's not up on the roof, would be to simply remove the panels when the storm is coming and put it in the garage or put it in your house until the storm passes, because it only takes a few minutes. So the thinking here is that this is something that could be one modular system if somebody just wants it, but that, at 380 watts, 400 watts, whatever, that's really not going to move the needle on your electric bill. So we're thinking that, most people will want something maybe, depending upon how much unshaded ground area they have, a half dozen, 8, 9, to offset, maybe 1/3 to 50, 60% of their electric bill. Again, depending upon whether they have electric appliances or gas appliances, as one example. I know I've gotten some some indicative numbers from some engineers at Clayton Homes, which is the largest manufacturer of manufactured homes in the US. And for their kind of standard models with gas appliances, 2 kilowatts could offset about 90% of the electric bill. So again, you have maybe half dozen of these and you're right about there at about 2 kilowatts. So let me show you another photo here of what it would look like with, you can see the garden hose there where we insert the water with the panel attached. There are 2 clamps here in one of the short end of the panel, and then you can't see them, but 2 other clamps here at the back end. Anyway, it's pretty straightforward. The idea is that we would not compete with solar installers. I don't see many solar installers salivating over 2 kilowatt rooftop deals. So I don't think that we're really stealing share from anybody, but really kind of having an alternative where you could ship something direct to the doorstep and, you know, with maybe a couple hours of work, put together a half dozen or so panels and call an electrician to make a dedicated connection to the house electrical panel. It's not a $25,000 job. And in fact, it's a fraction of that. And so we're thinking that it's not going to be stealing share from solar installers. And in fact, maybe hopefully we'll move the needle on solar adoption rates in rural America. So that's kind of a quick intro. Does anybody have any questions so far? Comments? Fire away.
Okay. Anybody have any you want to bring up? I've made a couple of notes as we're going through, but I didn't want to monopolize anything. But
in terms of temperature, how like in Trinidad and Tobago, we are located just above the equator belt. So you would expect, you know, we have very hot temperatures in Trinidad during the August period of time. The material for this is has it been tested against, say, 40, 50 degrees Celsius around those conditions as yet?
So we're using the same types of thermoplastic materials that would be used, say, in outdoor lawn furniture, jungle gyms, which, you know, I've had in South Florida, in Miami as well. So we get pretty brutal summers as well. Farm equipment, you know, fuel tanks that sit out in the field for basically year round in all sorts of weather conditions. So yeah, I think this would do fine in you know, in extreme heat. Yeah, I don't anticipate that being a problem in close to the equator.
okay. Yeah, I was thinking the opposite thing. You can tell I'm at the northern end. Freeze thaw on water ballast. You know, is there the expansion issue of frozen water, things like that? Then I was also thinking algae. You know, if you're venting it to oxygen, is there an issue with algae buildup or anything like that? The water getting all mucky. You gonna throw chlorine in or what?
Well, you could put antifreeze in. That's one of the things that we've looked at. We've engineered the fill cap, so that you cannot fill it to the brim to allow for expansion in freeze thaw zones. And in a next iteration, it's going to be able to be more customer friendly to accept sand or gravel instead of water as an option for people that are concerned about the freeze thaw issue.
Okay. I was also wondering about clicking them together. Do these things operate as a unit when you've got multiples? You know, that is easy to just keep them so they're not all cattywampus out there.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth, and we've gone actually back and forth on that, Jay, because There is something about the symmetry of having it form a nice line, but then again, we also want it to be suitable for uneven terrain, right?
Yeah.
And if I think we kind of go, we don't have a definitive answer on that yet. We may end up engineering a solution that kind of the customer decides, because if you do have uneven terrain and you're forcing them to kind of click together, it could create stresses on the plastic over time in ways that you really don't want to encourage over a 10 or 20-year period.
Okay.
You know?
And are you relying on the weight to be a deterrent for theft? You know, because as it looks there, it looks like somebody could walk off with it, you know, fairly easily.
Yeah, so it's 200 pounds when it's full, which will take a few minutes for it to empty out when you pull the drain plug. But what we also want to do is we want to add inside, embed a GPS tracker so that when the homeowner basically sets up the system, they assign it a GPS coordinates to their address. And so the GPS tracker will sound an alarm and send them an alert if the system is moved beyond those coordinates.
Okay. And let's see. Oh, one thing that occurred to me, I was in a meeting not too long ago with a group that does assistance to low-income homeowners, and they were looking for a solar solution that was very small, because a lot of these little units don't have large electric bills, but they were concerned about if the tenant leaves, they'd like to be able to move the unit to a different tenant, you know, so a permanently installed issue was a big issue. So it just struck me, this is a nice thing to link in with some of these utility assistance programs, where you can come in and provide, you know, a solar solution to low-income households. That's something that doesn't take a lot of time to install, but can also be removed should that tenant change or the situation change. You know, it seems like it has a lot of flexibility that way.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up on that, because we've made a point of wanting to design this so that people weren't locked in, so that they didn't have to view it as a 30-year investment, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think there's option value in being able to think about something that you're going to spend $5,000 on, or $4,000 or whatever, but have the peace of mind to know that if you do move down the road, you can take it with you, right? So we actually thought about renters. So I'd love to follow up on the utility assistance angle.
And were all of these microinverter systems? It looked like there was a microinverter on the one you showed.
That's what we were thinking. I mean, it's ultimately what we're producing kind of in-house is the mounting system itself. So, but we've engineered it so that it can work with, you know, with any panel manufacturer pretty much that are 60 cell or 120 if they're half cell. And also microinverter or inverter. The thinking in kind of the preference for going with the microinverter is that, you know, being on the ground and not on the roof, you may be more subject to shading, even though you have flexibility to move it. So we just wanted to kind of show it with the microinverter for that reason, but there's no reason it couldn't work with other types of inverters as well.
Okay, well, certainly ease of installation, the microinverter seems to make sense. And there was a question there. It said, it looks like this is pretty enclosed. Are we going to get passive air cooling on this? Is there a way for the air to move under it?
Yep. In fact, I don't have a side view, but one of the earlier design versions of this was without the side panels. And I showed it to an AHJ in California who sits on pretty much, I mean, like literally like 31 UL panels, including, you know, the relevant solar ones. And and actually he came up with the comment about needing to protect from, having, little Johnny go run after his ball and go underneath the panel. And so that's where we put in the side panels, but we were careful. I'm not sure, you really can't make out here, but you cannot put your fingers in. I mean, it passes the finger test. I forget if it's 7/8 of an inch or whatever it is. So you can't get your
Right.
hand under there. But it does allow for convection cooling, or it does allow for airflow to pass through, both on the sides and also at the ends.
Okay. Yeah, maybe a soffit vent or something like that in the side panel would facilitate that if that becomes an issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Those little round vents keeps people from getting, I was thinking critter access is another issue, so blocking it off for that. But I know putting the microinverter in there, if it's not cooled, you're going to get some electronic issues there.
For sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, somebody's mentioning, what about a lighter color to keep things cooler? Blend with concrete, who knows, that's something to consider. I don't know.
Yeah, anything, we could do any color. I mean, we kind of started with black. I think it looks cooler. It's very sleek and elegant looking.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's no reason we couldn't use other types of colors as well.
You did say it's a 60 cell limitation. I assume if this gets to be a thing, you'd have other versions too. It would just be a slight modification to make them bigger. I mean, one of the problems we're seeing, I would think from your perspective, is module sizes are getting less standardized as they're moving to the larger cells and larger numbers of cells. I don't know if that's going to be an issue for you. In the past, the modules have all been fairly conforming in dimensions, but when I was doing some research, I saw they're all over the place coming up, with 80 cell big cells and 72 cell small cells and 96 and half cuts and perks and shingled and, all of those. So that might want to make a decision whether you've got a little adjustable clipping mechanism there instead of fixed, just to give some flexibility.
Yeah. You're right about the lack of uniformity, but there is a trend with respect to weight, and the weight's going up, 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 up. And I think for a residential application where some of your clients could be elderly, the idea of having to maneuver a 55-pound
recording in progress
panel, it just kind of seems, I don't know, it's not kind of the direction we want to go. If anything, I've actually been thinking about going smaller, because that may provide, say, a 36 cell module, like say 1 square meter, because that may provide more opportunities with different yard configurations, to be able to place it, say, more say in a straight line, you know what I mean? Or it really kind of depends on the ability of what your shading patterns are in your yard, right? But I hear you. I mean, again, 72 cell, it's historically been more for C&I and utility scale and less so about residential, so I don't know that we would go mega size, because mega size implies mega weight.
I was also trying to think through, I get a lot of questions about RVs, will something like this work with an RV? I can see a grid tied inverter like a microinverter might be difficult in that situation, But I wonder if a little standalone, somehow a version for RVs would be something that would be marketable as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Would
So.
get a little more complicated in your equipment, but you could do it. I guess, I suspect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dennis,
Anybody?
Dennis, this is less technical, maybe more like operational or businessy. Have you thought about this application in the emerging markets across the world?
Yeah.
Rural America, absolutely. And the other thing that I was thinking about is, both of those actually are probably kind of personal experience, right? Both from like where I grew up. But then, some of the places that I saw in the Army, I think would hugely benefit from a system like this, because it's very simple. I believe it works. And the energy needs in a lot of those places isn't as nearly as intense as it is in the United States. So interested, not to have you go in 1,000 different directions, but interested in you to hear your thoughts on this application scaled globally. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. You're right, Tony. I think it does have applicability in certain, developing countries. I wonder, well, and for example, refugee settlements, as kind of an emergency source of power that you can put up fairly quickly, right? And you and I have talked about DoD applications as well for emergency power, for the forward operating bases, all sorts of, the mind kind of races in terms of potential applications for something like this. So yeah, I haven't explored the emerging market angle too much, to be honest with you. But I definitely think, I wonder though, whether it's more, whether this is more suited for, say, I don't know if this is a little bit too much for the poorest of the poor in the developing world.
Sure, I would completely agree. Yeah, right. Like if you're making $1, $1.50 a day, right? This is not the solution. But also, depending on who the buyer is, right? USAID, State Department, could be the buyer of this and deploy the technology or subcontract it to a local entrepreneur, local companies to deploy this on the ground. What I love about your system is it's simple. You're thoughtful as far as it's not like gold plated. You're thoughtful about weight, about theft, about reliability. So you kind of check all of like those basic building blocks, but it's not too complicated and thus too expensive. Because really, you go into the cost issue, and you go into, in the Army we would say you got to design it for Joe, right? Which is essentially the lowest common denominator. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Anybody who does, something that you've never conceived of, Joe will do in rolling this out, right? And I think you've done a lot of that great work. So, obviously, we're in the cohort together. We'll have a lot more conversations. But in your presentation today and actually seeing it in front of me, that's kind of where my mind goes. And not to say that the U.S. there's not an application in the U.S. Just this seems like the size, the simplicity, and the output for a lot of solutions in places that I've been.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, if I might ask, what would be the, you have looked at a cost for this in terms of resale?
Yeah, what's the cost?
So most of the cost is going to be in the panels and the inverters, right?
Yeah.
And then you figure what the mounting system, what we're producing, and then the BOS electrical. And then basically we're replacing a racking system with a mounting system. right? So, and we're gonna, it's more costly to produce that mounting system than it is to produce, say, an Iron Ridge racking system, which might be, I don't know, 9 to 11 cents per watt, something, for something like that. So I'd say we're aiming for an all-in installed cost, so that includes the electrical piece as well, of $2 a watt.
Okay.
In the US.
Yeah, I was just kind of envisioning, because I keep thinking back when I see this thing, I get so many people with their RVs who are saying, I want to do RVs, I want to do RVs. And I was wondering, because the Enphase IQ8 now allows for generation when the sun is shining, when it's disconnected from the grid, I just wonder if you couldn't have a little module with the IQ8 that's hooked up directly to an outlet and have it as a self-contained little solar generator there producing, 120 AC, from a plug on the side or the back of that unit connected in with the module. Now, I know that's not your total intent, but it's a market niche, where you just set this thing up, and instead of having an electrician come hook it up to the power, you just plug into it like it's a portable generator.
Right.
For when you're talking about emergency use or RV use or taking it out on a picnic or who knows what, but it just seems compact enough that might be a thing, an option.
Yeah, for sure.
Dennis,
Yeah.
is there room underneath the panel in that structure to put a battery and a charge controller so you could, and then you could have like a 5-volt output to recharge cell phones?
Yep. There is room underneath to do that.
Cool.
See, we're making it more complicated all the time. You want a simple solution, and we'll just keep adding bells and whistles until you need a degree to install it. Right. So, okay. Anybody else have any comments, any ideas? Things, of course, you've got that in portrait. I suspect you could do a landscape version rather than smaller panels if you're worried about profile. That's an option.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Would you buy one?
I would like to know the cost of the mounting system by itself for the unit. I know something, what it would cost, say, per unit. And then from that, I would have an idea how it would factor in terms of how I could use it, as I was saying, Trinidad and Tobago in my case.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to know how much it costs before I decide whether I want to buy it or not.
Well, you're not a good American. Come on, man. Yeah, and I was just wondering if there is, I know we have seen some ballasted commercial applications, out there. And I wonder if this would be competitive. I know you're looking at the small market, but there's a lot of, temporary commercial installations or black field, gray field type situations where you don't want to disrupt the soil and, have something where you can put these things to give you a certain amount of flexibility, even on a large scale, a 100 kilowatt kind of scale, whether it would be competitive with some of the other systems that are out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I don't know what those systems are charging, right? My understanding, I mean, you're talking about the ballasted ones that use kind of concrete blocks as the ballast.
There's some like that, but then I also saw there's ones that have almost like little buckets where you can dump fill into the bucket to hold it in place. And of course has a little drain area so it doesn't just become a pond. But so I don't know what those cost either, but it's just something that you can see, because if you're competitive, there's no reason to limit it to your original vision. Obviously, you got to get into the market that you're going to get into, but then always hold that as a potential expansion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I see all of these old abandoned shopping centers or old runways where it's mostly concrete, but it would be a great place for a temporary solar array until they've decided that the next mall developer is going to come and buy that property, and then they can move everything off to another piece of property or whatever. And that could be 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, as those things sit idle.
It's funny you mentioned that, Jay, because I was speaking with an installer in Massachusetts who asked me the same thing. He said, "Have you thought about putting it in the parking lots of defunct malls?" Right? Which, I mean, there's tons of them, right? Every community has them, and it's a way for the owner to extract some money out of a property that they're just paying property taxes on, right?
Sure. And they probably got pretty good electrical infrastructure to connect in because they were having to feed that large building. So there's probably not a lot of, front end cost in doing that.
Yeah. I've even, and I haven't really pursued it. But another thought was like for example, in the Central Valley of California, you have a lot of farmers that are letting their portion of their farm, cases, the entire farm, lay fallow because of the droughts that they're going and the issues of getting access to water. So I've wondered whether having access to a portable solar option where you're not pouring concrete and you're not touching the soil, you're not putting anything fixed in place for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You could move it in 2 years. If this could be kind of an option for a farmer, to extract value from land that they would otherwise just let go for the next few years.
Right.
Yeah.
Although, looking at the low profile on that, weed control and things like that may be an issue. Things growing up around it, unless you're putting it on a concrete base.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on it? I mean, my initial reaction is I think it looks pretty sleek. I think there's definitely a market niche and it may expand out quite a lot. I think we're moving towards a flexibility, temporary, as these costs are less and less, you may find that a lot of opportunities for people who don't know about how long they're going to be at a location, but it still will make sense. So,
one question:
Sure.
How if we stack the front of the stands on each other, like just the front back to front, would that block enough light to cause solar panel not work as well if we set them on a tennis court?
Oh, you'd have to worry about inner row shading you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that would be probably some sort of instruction. I don't know if you're thinking that these things are big enough or the arrays are big enough that inner row shading becomes an issue, but in larger installations, you'd have to give some guidance to say, at this latitude, you'd need to make sure that you leave at least this much clear space between the rows so that the front doesn't shade the back.
Okay.
Yeah, usually it's like a 1 to 3, a 1 to 4, depending on your latitude. 40 degrees north, I think it's like a 1 to 3. So if the back of it is, I don't know, 2 feet off the ground, and the front of it's 1 foot off the ground, you've got a 1 foot thing. So you'd need a 3 feet spacing, because you've got a 1 foot rise. So 1 to 3. And then as you go further north, it's a 1 to 4. You get close to where Devon End lives, you can just set them right next to each other because the sun's overhead and,
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dennis. Hopefully we gave you some some things, maybe even something you hadn't already thought of. So
Yeah,
probably
sure.
not, but so yeah, keep us and feel free to join each week and keep us in the loop about what's going on.
Cool. Appreciate it.
All right. Anybody else have anything before we call it a day? I don't see anybody. All right. Well, we'll see you all next Tuesday then. Bye-bye.